The depot at Willow Creek wasn't much. Just weathered planks and a sagging roof that looked like it might cave under the next good rain. Clara had been standing there since noon, and now the sun hung low and mean over the western hills, turning everything the color of old blood. Her carpet bag sat at her feet, heavy with everything she owned. Not much. A change of clothes. Her mother's locket. The letter. She pulled it out again, though she'd read it so many times the creases had worn soft. Miss Whitlock, I am prepared to honor our arrangement. Arrive at Willow Creek on the 15th. I will meet you there. We will marry within the week. Thomas Brennan. Short. Businesslike. Exactly what she'd expected from a man who'd advertised for a wife in a Boston newspaper. But he wasn't here. The station agent, a dried-up man with tobacco-stained whiskers, had left an hour ago, locking the office door behind him without a word. The afternoon stage had come and gone. 3 freight wagons, a family in a covered wagon heading further west. All of them had looked at her standing there alone, and all of them had looked away. Clara's stomach growled. She'd eaten the last of her bread that morning before the train pulled in. There was nothing in this place. No hotel, no boarding house, just the depot, a half-collapsed livery, and a scatter of buildings that might have been homes or might have been abandoned. Hard to tell in this light. She could go back. The eastbound train would come through tomorrow morning. She still had enough money for a ticket to... where? Boston? She'd left nothing there but debts and a cousin who'd made it clear Clara had overstayed her welcome. Her parents were 5 years dead. Her older sister had married a merchant and moved to Philadelphia, and had written exactly once since the wedding, a cold little note that said, "I'm sorry, but Robert doesn't approve of me supporting you any longer." Supporting. As if the occasional hand-me-down dress had been some great charity. No, there was nothing to go back to, but there was nothing here either. Clara sat down on her bag, careful with her skirts. The gray wool was already dusty from travel, but it was the only decent dress she had left. She'd sold everything else to pay for the train ticket west. The sky darkened, first stars pricked through. She thought about Thomas Brennan's letter again. 3 months of correspondence, stiff, formal exchanges that told her almost nothing about the man, except that he could write a clear sentence and claim to own a working homestead. He'd sent a photograph, a stern-faced man with dark hair and a thick beard, standing in front of a rough cabin. She'd sent one of herself in return, taken 2 years ago when she still had a little money for such things. They'd agreed to terms. He needed a wife. She needed security. It wasn't love, but Clara had stopped believing in love the day her father died, and left them with nothing but debts and broken promises. This was supposed to be practical, a solution. But practical solutions required both parties to show up. A coyote yipped somewhere in the hills. Another answered. The sound made her skin crawl. She'd heard stories about Montana, about how wild it still was, how rough. Boston ladies had clucked their tongues and said things like, "My dear, you'll be murdered by Indians," or "The winters will kill you if the loneliness doesn't." Clara hadn't cared. She'd been desperate enough to take the risk. Desperate. She hated that word, hated how true it was. The platform creaked. She jerked her head up. A man stood at the edge of the depot, half in shadow. Tall, broad shoulders, a hat pulled low enough that she couldn't see his face. Clara's hand went to the small knife she kept in her pocket. A foolish gesture, probably, but it made her feel slightly less helpless. "Miss Whitlock?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. She stood slowly. "Who's asking?" He stepped into the last of the daylight, and she got a better look. Older than she'd expected, maybe 35, maybe 40. Hard to tell with men who spent their lives outside. His face was all angles and sun damage, with pale eyes that looked gray or maybe blue depending on the light. Dark hair streaked with silver, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in at least a week. He didn't look like the photograph. "Name's Rowan Hale," he said. "I work the land adjacent to the Brennan place." Clara's heart sank. "Where is he?" "Laid up. Broke his leg 3 days ago trying to fix a roof beam." Rowan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Infection set in. Doc says he won't be walking for 6 weeks, maybe more." The words hit like stones. 6 weeks. She'd spent her last dollar getting here. She had no money for lodging, no way to support herself. No. "He sent me to fetch you," Rowan continued. "Figured you'd need a place to stay until he's back on his feet." Clara stared at him. He sent you? Yes, ma'am. A stranger. I know how it sounds. Do you? Her voice came out sharper than she intended, but she was too tired to care. I traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man I've never met, and he can't even bother to come meet me himself. Instead, he sends, what, a ranch hand? A neighbor? Someone who might be lying just to get a foolish woman alone on a dark road? Rowan's expression didn't change. That's fair. Is it? You don't know me. You don't know Thomas. You got no reason to trust either of us. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and held it out. He wrote this. Maybe it'll help. Clara snatched the paper and moved closer to the depot window where a sliver of lamplight still showed through the cracks. She unfolded it. Miss Whitlock, I regret that I cannot meet you as planned. My injuries prevent travel. Mr. Hale is a man of integrity and will see you safely to my property. I understand if you choose to leave, but if you are willing to wait, I will honor our agreement once I am recovered. The choice is yours. T. Brennan. The handwriting matched his letters. Clara folded the note and looked at Rowan Hale. He hadn't moved, hadn't tried to rush her or charm her or do any of the things a dishonest man might do. What happens if I go with you? She asked. I take you to the Brennan homestead. There's a room. It's not much, but it's dry and you can lock the door. I'll bring supplies in the morning. You can stay there until Thomas is well enough to... He stopped. To sort things out. And if I don't go with you? Rowan glanced back at the empty depot. Then you wait here until the eastbound train tomorrow morning. It's your choice, Miss Whitlock. I'm not here to force anything. That, somehow, was what decided her. A dishonest man would have pressed, would have made promises, would have tried to make her feel like she had no other option. Rowan Hale just stood there, waiting. Clara picked up her carpet bag. How far is it? 8 miles, hour and a half on horseback, maybe less. She looked at the platform, then back at him. I've never ridden a horse. You'll ride with me. There's a saddle horn to hold on to. Clara hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was foolish. Getting on a horse with a strange man, heading into empty country with no one to hear her scream if things went wrong. But what other choice was there? Go back to Boston with nothing? Sleep on this platform and hope no one bothered her before morning? Beg the station agent for work he clearly didn't have? She'd already gambled everything on a stranger's promise. What was one more risk? All right, she said. Rowan nodded and walked toward the side of the depot where a horse stood waiting. A big, patient-looking bay gelding with a saddle that had seen better years. He secured her bag to the back of the saddle, then mounted in one smooth motion and reached down. Give me your hand. Clara gripped his wrist and let him pull her up. She landed awkwardly behind the saddle, skirts bunching up around her knees in a way that would have horrified her mother. Hold on to the saddle or hold on to me, Rowan said. Either way, hold tight. Trail's rough in places. She chose the saddle horn, safer, less intimate. Rowan clicked his tongue and the horse moved forward away from the depot and into the gathering dark. The first mile passed in silence. Clara held on tight as the horse picked its way along a rutted trail that seemed to exist more in Rowan's head than on the actual ground. The moon rose, a thin crescent that gave just enough light to see shapes, but not details. Hills rolled away on either side, covered in scrub and sage that smelled sharp and clean. It was nothing like Boston, nothing like anywhere she'd ever been. The emptiness felt enormous, suffocating, like the land itself was trying to swallow her whole. You all right back there? Rowan asked. Fine. You're breathing hard. I said I'm fine. He didn't push. Another half mile. The trail climbed slightly, and Clara's arms started to ache from holding on. She'd thought she was strong. Years of scrubbing floors and hauling laundry had left her with calluses and muscle. But this was different. This was trying to stay upright on a moving animal while exhaustion dragged at every bone. Why'd you come all this way? Rowan asked suddenly. Clara blinked. Excuse me? Montana. Thomas said you were from Boston. That's a hell of a trip for a man you never met. That's my business. Fair enough. They rode on, but the question had wormed under her skin. Why had she come? The easy answer was desperation. The honest answer was worse. She'd come because staying meant admitting she'd failed, that her parents had died poor and she'd never managed to climb out of the hole they'd left her in. That she was 26 and unmarried and unwanted, with no prospects and no future except maybe a factory job that would grind her down to nothing. She'd come because Thomas Brennan's stiff little letters had offered something she'd lost the day her father's creditors sold everything they owned: control. A clear arrangement. No romance, no risk of heartbreak, just two people agreeing to build a life because it made practical sense. Except now even that was broken. "How bad is he?" she asked. "Thomas?" "Yes." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Bad enough. Bone broke clean through. Doc said it, but the wound's infected. He's feverish, talking out of his head half the time." Clara's stomach twisted. "Will he live?" "Doc thinks so, but it'll be a while before he's up and around. 6 weeks. At least." 6 weeks of what? Sitting in a stranger's cabin, waiting for another stranger to recover enough to marry her? Living on charity from a man who owed her nothing? "I should have stayed in Boston," she muttered. "Maybe," Rowan said. "But you didn't. Clearly. That means something." Clara frowned. "What?" "You got on that train knowing you might end up exactly where you are now, alone in the middle of nowhere with no guarantees. You did it anyway. That takes guts." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The trail leveled out, and the horse picked up its pace slightly. Clara's fingers were starting to go numb from gripping the saddle horn. "How do you know Thomas?" she asked, partly to distract herself. "Neighboring land," Rowan said. "We help each other out when needed, share tools, that sort of thing." "Are you married?" "No, ma'am." "Why not?" The question came out before she could stop it. Too personal, too blunt. But Rowan didn't seem offended. "Tried once," he said. "Didn't take." Clara waited for more, but he didn't offer it. They crested a low rise and the land opened up ahead. A shallow valley with a creek running through it, visible as a dark snake in the moonlight. On the far side, she could just make out two structures, a larger cabin and a smaller one about 50 yards away. "That's it," Rowan said. "The big one's Thomas's place. The small one's mine." Clara stared. The cabins looked rough even from a distance. Raw wood, simple construction, the kind of buildings that said survival more than home. "Which one am I staying in?" "Thomas's. Like I said, there's a room. He's in the main area where I can keep an eye on him." "You've been taking care of him?" "Someone had to." They rode down into the valley. As they got closer, Clara could see more details. A woodpile stacked against one wall, a chicken coop that looked half collapsed, a small corral with a fence that needed mending. Everything looked hard used and barely held together. Rowan dismounted and reached up to help her down. Clara slid off the horse awkwardly, her legs shaky and stiff. She almost fell, but Rowan caught her elbow and steadied her. "Give it a minute," he said. "You'll get your legs back." She pulled away from him and forced herself to stand upright. Her whole body ached. Rowan grabbed her bag and led her to the larger cabin. He pushed the door open, it wasn't locked, and gestured her inside. The interior was dim, lit only by a single lamp burning low on a rough table. Clara's eyes adjusted slowly. One main room. A stone fireplace on the far wall, cold now. A table with two chairs. A narrow bed against one wall where a man lay motionless, covered in blankets despite the summer heat. Thomas Brennan. Clara moved closer. He looked worse than she'd imagined. His face was pale and slick with sweat, his breathing shallow and rapid. The leg, his right one, was splinted and wrapped in bandages that looked clean but bulky. "He won't wake up," Rowan said quietly. "Fever's got him pretty deep." Clara stared at the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry. He looked nothing like his photograph, thinner, weaker, almost frail. This was supposed to be her future. "The room's through there," Rowan said, nodding toward a narrow door on the opposite wall. "It's small, but it's got a bed and a window that opens. Door locks from the inside." Clara walked over and pushed the door open. He wasn't lying. It was small, barely big enough for the narrow bed and a single chair. But it was clean, and the window did open, and there was a hook-and-eye latch on the door. "I'll bring food in the morning," Rowan said. "There's water in the pitcher by the bed. If you need anything tonight, I'm in the other cabin. Just call out." Clara turned to face him. "Why are you doing this?" Rowan looked at her for a long moment. "Doing what?" "Helping. You don't know me. Thomas's situation isn't your responsibility. You could have just left me at that depot. Could have, he agreed. So why didn't you? He shifted his weight, uncomfortable again. Because leaving people stranded isn't something I do. It wasn't a good answer, or maybe it was too good, too simple to be believable. But Clara was too tired to argue. Thank you, she said stiffly. Rowan nodded and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold. Lock it behind me, and don't open it for anyone but me unless you know who they are. Then he was gone. Clara stood alone in the main room, listening to the sound of the horse walking away. She looked at Thomas Brennan again, this stranger who'd promised her a life, and then couldn't even stay conscious to meet her. She felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just a hollow, exhausted numbness. She went into the small room, closed the door, and latched it. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the weight of everything that had happened. She'd gambled everything, and she'd lost. The bed was hard and the blanket smelled like dust, but Clara lay down anyway. She didn't bother undressing, she just closed her eyes and waited for sleep to take her somewhere else. It didn't come easy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window frame. A coyote howled. Another answered, and Clara Whitlock lay awake in a stranger's cabin in the middle of Montana, wondering what the hell she was going to do next. Morning came too bright and too early. Clara woke to the sound of someone moving around in the main room, quiet, deliberate footsteps. She sat up fast, heart pounding, and then remembered where she was. Rowan. It had to be. She smoothed her hair as best she could and unlocked the door. Rowan was crouched by the fireplace, building a fire. He glanced up when she entered. Morning. Good morning. He'd brought supplies. She could see them on the table. A sack of flour, coffee, salt, a cloth-wrapped bundle that might have been bacon. Thomas was still unconscious, still sweating. How is he? Clara asked. Same. Rowan stood and brushed ash off his hands. Fever hasn't broken yet. Clara moved to the table and looked at the supplies. This is generous. It's practical, Rowan said. You need to eat. So does he when he wakes up. I can cook. Good. Because I can't. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, the first she'd seen. It disappeared quickly. There's a stove outside, around the back. Works better than the fireplace for cooking. I'll show you. Clara followed him out into the daylight. The valley looked different in the sun, still rough, still empty, but less hostile. The creek sparkled. Birds she couldn't name called to each other from the scrub. The outdoor stove was a simple metal contraption with a chimney pipe and a flat cooking surface. Rowan showed her how to light it, how to control the heat. Where's the nearest town? Clara asked. 16 miles south. Not much there. General store, blacksmith, doc's office. That's where the doctor is, the one treating Thomas? Yeah, he came out 2 days ago. Said he'd check back in a week. A week? Clara looked around the homestead, at the half-finished corral, the sagging chicken coop, the field that should have been planted but wasn't. What happened here? She asked. Rowan followed her gaze. Thomas was doing all right until the accident. He'd just started getting things in order for... He stopped. For me, Clara finished. Yeah. She felt a strange twist of guilt. This man had broken himself trying to make a place ready for a wife he'd never met, and now he was lying unconscious while she stood here resenting him for it. I can help, she said suddenly. Rowan looked at her. Help how? The place. It needs work. I'm not going to just sit in that room for 6 weeks waiting. She gestured at the corral. I can mend things, organize, cook. I'm not useless. Didn't say you were. Then let me help. Rowan studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing straight through her, past the offer of help to the real reason she needed to do something, anything, to feel like less of a burden. All right, he said finally, but you take breaks. It's hot, and you're not used to the altitude. Drink water. Don't push yourself stupid. Clara bristled. I know my own limits. Do you? She didn't answer. Rowan showed her where the tools were kept, a lean-to shed with half the roof missing. Hammers, nails, a saw that needed sharpening, wire for mending fences, a hoe and a shovel. Start wherever you want, he said. I'll be working the field. Shout if you need something. He walked away before she could respond. Clara stood alone in the morning sun. looking at the broken-down homestead that was supposed to have been her new life. Then she picked up a hammer and went to fix the chicken coop. By midday, Clara's hands were blistered and her dress was soaked with sweat. The chicken coop wasn't finished, not even close, but she'd managed to shore up the worst of the sagging wall and replace 3 broken slats. It was something. Progress. She straightened up, pressing a hand to the small of her back, and looked across the field. Rowan was still out there, working a patch of ground with a hoe. He'd taken off his shirt an hour ago and worked in just an undershirt, sleeves rolled up. Even from a distance, she could see the methodical rhythm of his work, steady, relentless, efficient. He didn't stop to rest. Clara wondered what drove a man to work like that, and why he'd taken on the burden of caring for a neighbor who couldn't even thank him. She went inside to check on Thomas. He was awake, barely. His eyes were open, cloudy, and unfocused, and he was mumbling something she couldn't make out. Clara grabbed a cloth, dampened it in the water bucket, and pressed it to his forehead. "Mr. Brennan?" His eyes rolled toward her. "Who?" "Clara Whitlock. I arrived last night." He blinked slowly, trying to process. "You came." "I did. I'm sorry." The words came out slurred. "I'm sorry." "Don't talk. You need to rest." But he kept trying. "Not what I promised." Clara squeezed the cloth and wiped his face again. "No, it's not." His eyes closed. "Sorry." Then he was gone again, slipping back into fever dreams. Clara sat there for a moment, looking at this man who'd promised her a future and delivered nothing but apologies. She should have been angry. Maybe she was. But mostly she just felt tired. She went back outside and returned to the chicken coop. Work was better than thinking. 3 days passed. Thomas's fever broke on the second night. By the third day, he was awake more than he was asleep, though still weak and in pain. Clara brought him broth, thin stuff made from salt and dried vegetables, and watched him struggle to eat. "You don't have to stay," he said. It was the first real conversation they'd had. Clara set the bowl aside. "Where would I go?" "Back east. I'll pay for the ticket." "With what money?" Thomas looked away. "I'll figure something out." "You're flat broke," Clara said bluntly. "Aren't you?" He didn't answer. "The homestead's barely standing. The field's not planted. You've got no livestock except a few chickens that don't even have a proper coop." She kept her voice even, matter of fact. "You advertised for a wife because you needed help, someone to share the work." "Yes." "Then let me work." Thomas met her eyes. "That's not fair to you." "Fair?" Clara almost laughed. "Nothing about this is fair, Mr. Brennan. I spent everything I had getting here. I can't go back. Even if I could, there's nothing there for me. So I'm staying, not because I want to, because I have to." She stood up and took the bowl. "When you're well enough, we'll figure out the rest. Until then, stop apologizing and focus on healing." She left before he could respond. Outside, Rowan was splitting wood. Clara watched him for a moment. The clean, powerful swing of the axe, the way each log split clean down the middle. "He's awake," she said. Rowan buried the axe in the chopping block and straightened. "Good." "He offered to send me back east." "What'd you say?" "That I'm staying." Rowan nodded slowly. "That what you want?" Clara looked at the homestead, at the field she'd helped weed, the coop she'd repaired, the porch she'd scrubbed clean of 3 years' worth of dirt. "I don't know what I want," she said honestly, "but I know what I need. I need to build something that won't fall apart the first time things get hard." Rowan picked up another log and set it on the block. "Then you're in the right place." "Am I?" He looked at her, really looked, like he was weighing something. "Most people would have left," he said, soon as they saw how bad it was. "But you didn't. You stayed and you worked. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yeah." He lifted the axe. "It does." He brought it down and the log split clean. Clara went back inside, and for the first time since arriving, she felt something other than desperation. She felt purpose. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. The first real argument happened over the water barrel. Clara had been at the homestead for 8 days when she noticed the barrel by the back door was cracked near the bottom. Not a bad crack, just a hairline split that wept water slowly enough that you wouldn't notice unless you were looking. But it meant they were losing maybe a gallon a day. And out here, that mattered. She mentioned it to Rowan while he was fixing a leather harness near the corral. "I saw it," he said, not looking up. "When?" "Week ago, maybe." Clara waited for more. When nothing came, she pressed. "Are you planning to fix it?" "When I get to it." "We're losing water." "I know." "Then why?" "Shh. Because there's 10 other things that need doing first." Rowan's hand stilled on the leather, but his voice stayed level. "Fence needs mending before the wind takes it down completely. Roof's got a leak over Thomas's bed that'll get worse when the rains come. The stovepipe's half rusted through. The barrel's a problem, Miss Whitlock, but it's not the biggest one." Clara felt heat rise in her chest. "So we just ignore it?" "We prioritize." "That's foolish." Now he did look up. His eyes were flat, unreadable. "You got a better system?" "Yes, fix the small things before they become big things." "And who's going to do that? You?" He set the harness aside and stood. "You've been here just over a week. You don't know this land. You don't know how things break out here, or what matters most when winter comes. So maybe before you start telling me what's foolish, you take a minute and realize you're not in Boston anymore." The words landed like a slap. Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of where I am." "Are you?" "Yes." "Then act like it." Rowan picked up the harness again, done with the conversation. Clara turned and walked away before she said something she'd regret. Her hands were shaking, from anger or humiliation, she wasn't sure. Maybe both. She went to the water barrel and crouched beside it, running her fingers over the crack. It wasn't a big job. If she had the right materials, she could patch it herself. Tar, maybe, or pitch from one of the pine trees she'd seen up in the hills. She stood and looked around the homestead. Rowan was right about one thing. There was a lot that needed fixing, more than 2 people could handle, even working from dawn to dusk. But that didn't mean she had to like the way he'd said it. Thomas called from inside. His voice was stronger now, though still thin. Clara went in and found him sitting up in bed, pale but lucid. "Heard you two going at it," he said. "We had a difference of opinion." "About the barrel." "Among other things." Thomas rubbed his face. He'd tried to shave that morning and done a poor job of it, leaving patches of stubble on his jaw. "Rowan's stubborn, always has been." "So I've noticed." "But he's not wrong. The barrel can wait." Clara pulled a chair over and sat down. "I'm not trying to cause problems. I just want to help." "I know." Thomas shifted his weight, wincing. "But you've got to understand, Rowan's been keeping this place from falling apart for 3 weeks now. He's doing the work of 2 men on top of managing his own land. He's tired. We both are." "I'm tired too." "I know." Clara looked down at her hands. The blisters had hardened into calluses, and her nails were broken and dirty. She'd scrubbed them every night, but the grime didn't come out completely. "This isn't what you expected either, is it?" she asked quietly. Thomas was silent for a moment. "No, I thought I'd have more time to get things ready. Thought I'd be able to meet you properly, show you around, make it feel like, I don't know, like a real home. It's not your fault you got hurt. Doesn't change the result." Clara met his eyes. They were brown, she noticed. Lighter than Rowan's. Softer, maybe. "Do you still want to go through with it, the marriage?" Thomas looked startled. "Do you?" "I asked first." He took a breath. "I don't know. Honestly, I don't. When I put that advertisement in the paper, I was thinking about practicality. 2 people working together, building something. I wasn't thinking about this." He gestured vaguely at himself, at the room, at everything. "About being useless. About you having to see me like this. You're not useless. I'm not much use either." Clara stood and smoothed her skirt. "Then get better. Focus on healing. We'll figure out the rest when you're back on your feet." She went outside before he could argue. Rowan was still at the corral, working on the fence now. He'd stripped down to his undershirt again, and sweat darkened the fabric between his shoulder blades. Clara walked past him without a word, heading for the chicken coop. She'd decided yesterday that the whole structure needed to be rebuilt, not just patched. Might as well start. She worked through the afternoon, pulling down the rotted boards and stacking them for kindling. The chickens, 4 scrawny hens and 1 rooster with an attitude problem, squawked and scattered every time she moved. "You're wasting your time." Clara turned. Rowan stood a few feet away, arms crossed. "Excuse me? The coop. It's not worth rebuilding. These chickens need shelter. They've been fine without it." "Fine isn't good enough." Clara yanked another board loose. "If you want eggs through the winter, they need a proper coop, dry, protected. Otherwise, they'll stop laying or die. And you know this how? Because I'm not stupid." She threw the board onto the pile. "My mother kept chickens when I was a girl, before we lost everything. I know how to take care of them." Rowan watched her for a moment, then uncrossed his arms. "You're going to need more lumber." "I know. There's some in the shed, not much, but enough to frame it out. I'll cut more tomorrow." Clara stopped and looked at him. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why help me? You just said it was a waste of time." Rowan shrugged. "I said the old coop wasn't worth rebuilding, didn't say a new one wasn't worth building." He walked away before she could respond. Clara stared after him, confused and irritated in equal measure. The man made no sense. One minute he was telling her she didn't know anything, the next he was offering to help. She went back to work, pulling boards and muttering under her breath. By evening, her arms ached and her head pounded from the heat. She went inside to start dinner and found Thomas asleep again, his breathing steady but still too shallow. She made a simple stew from dried beans and the last of the salt pork, then carried a bowl out to Rowan's cabin. He answered the door in shirt sleeves, looking surprised. "Figured you'd be hungry," Clara said, holding out the bowl. Rowan took it. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She started to leave, but his voice stopped her. "I shouldn't have snapped at you earlier, about the barrel." Clara turned. "You were right. I don't know this place." "No. But you're learning." He looked down at the bowl. "And you're not afraid of the work. That counts for something." It was as close to an apology as she was going to get, Clara realized. "Good night, Mr. Hale." "Rowan." "What?" "Call me Rowan. Mr. Hale makes me feel old." Clara almost smiled. "Good night, Rowan." She went back to the main cabin and ate her own dinner in silence, listening to Thomas's uneven breathing and the wind rattling the window frames. 3 weeks into her stay, Clara woke before dawn to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and went outside. Rowan was already at the chicken coop site, laying out the frame for the new structure. He'd brought lumber from somewhere, fresh-cut boards that still smelled of sap. "You're up early," Clara said. "Wanted to get the frame done before it gets too hot." Clara grabbed a hammer from the toolbox. "Show me what to do." They worked side by side through the morning, barely speaking except to ask for tools or confirm measurements. The frame came together slowly, 4 walls, a pitched roof, a door that would actually close. By midday, they had the basic structure up. Clara stepped back, wiping sweat from her face. "It's not pretty." "Doesn't need to be pretty. Needs to stand." Rowan tested one of the corner posts, pushing hard. It didn't budge. "This'll do." They broke for lunch, cold biscuits and water, and Clara found herself studying Rowan while he ate. He was a hard man to read. Quiet, but not unfriendly. Helpful, but not warm. She still didn't know much about him beyond the basics. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Rowan glanced up. "Go ahead." "You said you tried marriage once. What happened?" His expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind his eyes. "She died." Clara felt her stomach drop. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, It was a long time ago." "How long?" 8 years. He took another bite of biscuit, chewing slowly. "Her name was Sarah. We were married 6 months when she got sick. Fever. Went from fine to gone in 3 days." Clara didn't know what to say. "That must have been terrible." Rowan brushed crumbs off his hands. "After I moved out here. Figured the land was easier to manage than people." "Is it?" "Most days." Clara looked at the half-built chicken coop, at the field beyond it, at the rough cabin where Rowan lived alone. "Don't you get lonely?" "Sometimes." He stood and picked up his hammer. "But lonely's better than losing someone again." He went back to work before Clara could respond. She sat there for a moment thinking about what he'd said, about loss and loneliness and the choices people made to protect themselves. Then she stood and joined him, because work was easier than thinking too hard about any of it. By late afternoon, the coop was finished. Clara herded the chickens inside and watched them settle onto the new roosts, fluffing their feathers and clucking softly. "They look happy," she said. Rowan leaned against the doorframe. "They're chickens. They don't get happy." "How do you know?" "Because they're chickens." Clara laughed. The first real laugh she'd had since arriving. It felt strange and good at the same time. Rowan looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You should do that more." "What?" "Laugh." Clara felt her face heat. "I haven't had much reason to." "Fair enough." They walked back to the main cabin together. Thomas was awake, propped up with pillows and looking frustrated. "I heard hammering all day," he said. "What'd you build?" "A chicken coop," Clara said. "We already had one." "Not a good one." Thomas looked at Rowan. "She always this stubborn?" "Seems like." Clara bristled. "I'm standing right here." "We know," both men said at the same time. She threw her hands up and went to start dinner, leaving them to their grumbling. But as she worked, she felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Not quite happiness, but maybe the beginning of it. A sense of belonging, however fragile. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Clara woke early, made breakfast, checked on Thomas, then worked outside until the heat drove her into the shade. Rowan came by most mornings to help with the heavier tasks, mending fence, clearing brush, hauling water from the creek. They didn't talk much while they worked, but the silence between them grew more comfortable. Less like strangers forced together by circumstance, more like two people who'd found a way to coexist. Thomas improved slowly. By the 4th week, he could sit up without help and eat solid food. By the 5th, he was using a crutch to hobble around the cabin, cursing his weakness but determined to move. "I should be helping," he said one afternoon, watching Clara haul a bucket of water from the creek. "You are helping," Clara said, "by healing." "That's not help. That's just sitting around being useless." Clara set the bucket down with a thud. "Mr. Brennan, if you don't stop complaining about being useless, I'm going to make you useful by having you pluck chickens. Would you like that?" Thomas stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You've gotten mean." "I've gotten practical." "Same thing out here." Clara picked up the bucket and carried it inside. Thomas followed, slower but steadier than he'd been yesterday. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "If you must. Do you regret coming here?" Clara paused, considering. A month ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. But now? "I don't know," she said honestly. "I regret how it happened, but I don't regret staying." "Why not?" Clara looked around the cabin, at the clean floors, the organized shelves, the curtains she'd sewn from old flour sacks. "Because I've never built anything before. Not really. In Boston, I just survived. Here, I'm actually making something." Thomas nodded slowly. "And when I'm healed, when we have to decide about the marriage, then we decide." Clara met his eyes. "But not today." She went back to work, and Thomas didn't press. That night, after dinner, Rowan lingered by the door instead of heading back to his cabin. "Something on your mind?" Clara asked. "There's a dance in town Saturday night." Clara blinked. "A dance?" "Town meeting hall. They do it once a month. Music, food, that sort of thing." "Why are you telling me this?" Rowan shifted his weight. "Thought you might want to go. Get away from here for a bit. Meet some people." Clara looked down at her dress, the same gray wool she'd been wearing for weeks, now stained and worn. "I don't have anything to wear." "Don't think anyone cares much about that." "I care." Rowan nodded. "All right, just thought I'd ask." He started to leave, but Clara stopped him. "Wait, if I did go, would you come too?" Rowan turned back. "You asking me to escort you?" "I'm asking if you'll be there so I'm not completely alone in a room full of strangers." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Yeah, I'll be there." "All right then." "All right." After he left, Clara stood in the doorway for a long moment, wondering what she'd just agreed to. Thomas's voice came from the bed. "You know people are going to talk." "About what?" "About you going to a dance with Rowan while you're supposed to be marrying me." Clara turned. "We're not married yet. And it's just a dance. I know. Thomas adjusted his pillow. But folks out here don't always see things the way they are. They see what they want to see. Let them talk. You say that now. Clara blew out the lamp and went to her room, but Thomas's words stayed with her. She lay awake for a long time, thinking about reputation and appearances, and the fact that she'd stopped caring about either somewhere between the broken water barrel and the chicken coop. Saturday came hot and still. Clara spent the morning washing her hair in creek water and trying to make herself presentable. She had one other dress, a blue cotton that had been her second best in Boston, and she put it on despite the heat. It was too tight in the shoulders now. All the physical work had changed her body, made her stronger and broader. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the wash basin and barely recognized the woman staring back. Sunburned, calloused, hair lighter from the sun. Not Boston Clara, someone else entirely. Rowan arrived mid-afternoon with a wagon. He'd cleaned up too, fresh shirt, hair combed back, beard trimmed. "You look nice," Clara said before she could stop herself. Rowan's ears went red. "So do you." Thomas was sitting on the porch, leg propped up. "You two have fun. I'll just sit here and feel sorry for myself." "We can stay," Clara said. "No, go. I'll be fine." Rowan helped Clara into the wagon, and they headed toward town. The ride took nearly 2 hours, and they talked more than they had in all the previous weeks combined. Rowan told her about the other homesteaders, who was friendly, who to avoid, who made the best whiskey. Clara told him about Boston, the cold winters, the crowded streets, the way the ocean smelled at low tide. "Do you miss it?" Rowan asked. "Parts of it. Not the poverty, not the loneliness." Clara looked out at the open land rolling past. "But I miss the ocean, the sound of it. Never seen the ocean." "Never?" "Never been more than 100 miles from where I was born." Clara tried to imagine that. A whole life lived in one place, never curious about what lay beyond the next hill. "Don't you wonder?" "About what?" "Everything else. The world." Rowan shrugged. "The world's got enough trouble without me poking at it. I figure if I keep my corner of it working, that's enough." It was such a simple philosophy. Clara didn't know whether to admire it or pity it. The town appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings around a wide dirt road. Bigger than Clara had expected, but still small compared to anything in the east. The meeting hall was already crowded when they arrived. People milled around outside, talking and laughing. Children ran between the adults, shrieking with joy. Clara felt every eye turn to her as Rowan helped her down from the wagon. "That's Clara Whitlock," someone whispered. "The mail-order bride. I heard Brennan got hurt before they could marry. She's staying with him anyway. Scandalous." Clara kept her chin up and followed Rowan inside. The hall was decorated with paper streamers and wildflowers. A makeshift band, fiddle, guitar, and banjo, played in the corner. Tables lined one wall loaded with food. A woman approached, middle-aged, sturdy, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "You must be Miss Whitlock. I'm Margaret Hayes. My husband runs the general store." Clara shook her hand. "Pleased to meet you. How's Thomas doing? Better? Still weak, but improving." Margaret nodded. "Heard about his accident. Terrible timing." "Yes. But you stayed." It wasn't quite a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I did." "That takes guts." Margaret smiled. "Come on, I'll introduce you around. These folks are nosy, but they mean well." The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces. Most people were friendly, though Clara could feel the undercurrent of judgment from some. The women who thought she should have gone back east. The men who looked at her like she was something exotic and slightly dangerous. Rowan stayed close but didn't hover. He'd nod to people he knew, exchange a few words, then drift back to Clara's side. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Fine, just overwhelmed. Want to step outside?" "In a minute." The band struck up a livelier tune, and couples moved onto the makeshift dance floor. Margaret's husband, a tall man with a booming laugh, swept his wife into a dance that was more enthusiasm than skill. "You dance?" Rowan asked. Clara looked at him. "Are you asking?" "Might be." "I haven't danced in years." "Neither have I." They stood there for a moment, both hesitating. Then Rowan held out his hand. Clara took it. He led her onto the floor, and they joined the chaos of spinning couples. Rowan wasn't a good dancer. He was stiff and uncertain, but he tried. Clara found herself laughing when he stepped on her foot for the third time. "Sorry," he muttered. "Don't apologize. Just keep going." They made it through the song without causing any major injuries. When the music ended, they were both breathing hard and grinning like fools. "That was terrible," Clara said. "Completely." "Want to try again?" Rowan's grin widened. "Yeah." They danced 3 more songs, getting slightly better each time. Or maybe just caring less about being good. When Clara finally begged for a break, they went outside to cool down. The sun had set, and the air had dropped from brutal to merely warm. They sat on the steps of the meeting hall, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. "Thank you for bringing me," Clara said. "Thank you for coming." "I mean it. I needed this." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You settling in all right? At the homestead?" "I think so. It's strange. I came here expecting one thing and got something completely different, but I don't hate it." "That's good." "What about you? Do you regret helping us? Taking care of Thomas, dealing with me showing up?" Rowan looked at her, his face half in shadow. "No, I don't regret it." "Why not?" "Because you're not what I expected either." "What did you expect?" "Someone fragile, someone who'd break." Clara laughed softly. "I'm not fragile." "No, you're not." They sat in comfortable silence until the music started up again inside. Clara knew they should go back in, be social, keep up appearances, but she didn't want to move. Neither, it seemed, did Rowan. So they sat there on the steps, watching the fireflies and listening to the distant laughter. And Clara thought that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something here that she hadn't even known she was looking for. The ride back was quiet, both of them tired but content. The moon was up, bright enough to light the trail. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. "Sure." "Why do you help Thomas? You said you're neighbors, but it's more than that. You've been taking care of everything for weeks." Rowan was silent for so long that Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, finally, "Because someone did the same for me once. After Sarah died, I couldn't get out of bed for a month. Didn't eat, didn't work, didn't care if the whole place fell down around me. My neighbor, old man named Pritchard, he came by every day. Fed my animals, fixed what needed fixing, made sure I didn't starve. Never asked for anything, never made me feel weak for needing help." Rowan cleared his throat. "He died 2 years ago. Before he went, he told me to pass it on. Said that's how people survive out here, by taking care of each other when things get bad." Clara felt something tight in her chest. "That's a good philosophy. It's the only one that works." They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the homestead, Rowan helped her down from the wagon. "Good night, Clara." It was the first time he'd used her first name. "Good night, Rowan." She went inside and found Thomas still awake, reading by lamplight. "How was it?" he asked. "Good. I met people. I danced." "With Rowan?" "Yes." Thomas studied her face. "You like him?" It wasn't a question. Clara sat down heavily. "I don't know what I feel. Everything's so complicated." "Doesn't have to be." "How can you say that? I came here to marry you. I've been living in your house for weeks. People are already talking, and now I'm—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Falling for someone else?" Thomas said gently. Clara put her face in her hands. "I don't know." "It's all right if you are." She looked up. "How can you say that?" "Because I'm not in love with you either." Thomas set his book aside. "I thought I could do this. The practical marriage, the partnership. But Clara, you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who looks at you the way Rowan does." "He doesn't—" "He does. I see it every time he's around you." Thomas smiled sadly. "And you look at him the same way." Clara stood and paced to the window. "This is insane. I've only known him for 6 weeks. And you've known me for the same amount of time. What's the difference?" The difference was everything and nothing. Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass and tried to sort through the tangle in her head. "I'm going to bed," she said finally. "Clara, please, I can't talk about this anymore tonight." She went to her room and closed the door, but sleep was a long time coming. She lay in the darkness, thinking about Rowan's hand in hers, about the way he'd smiled when they danced, about the future she'd thought she wanted, and the one that might actually make her happy. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Clara let herself imagine staying, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The morning after the dance, Clara woke to raised voices outside. She dressed quickly and found Thomas standing in the doorway on his crutch, arguing with a man she'd never seen before. The stranger was older, maybe 50, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that took in everything. He wore a badge pinned to his vest. "Sheriff," Thomas was saying, his voice tight, "this isn't your concern. Becomes my concern when people start talking." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Clara as she stepped onto the porch. "You Miss Whitlock?" "I am." "Sheriff Ben Porter, got a few questions for you, if you don't mind." Clara's stomach nodded. "Questions about what?" "About your living arrangements here." Porter's tone was neutral, but his eyes weren't friendly. "You and Mr. Brennan married yet?" "No." "Planning to be?" Clara glanced at Thomas, who looked like he wanted to throw his crutch at the sheriff. "We haven't decided." "But you're living under his roof." "In a separate room with a lock on the door." Porter made a non-committal sound. "Folks in town are concerned about the propriety of the situation. Unmarried woman, 2 men, no chaperone." "2 men?" Claire's voice went sharp. "Mr. Hale lives in his own cabin 50 yards away. He's been helping because Mr. Brennan was injured and couldn't manage alone. There's nothing improper happening here." "That how you see it?" "That's how it is." The sheriff looked at Thomas. "You got anything to add?" "Just that you're wasting your time, Ben. Miss Whitlock's told you the truth. Now, unless you've got actual business here, I'd appreciate you leaving." Porter studied them both for a long moment. Then he tipped his hat. "Fair enough. But you might want to think about making things official sooner rather than later. Saves everyone a lot of headaches." He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Clara stood frozen on the porch, fury and humiliation warring in her chest. "People sent the sheriff? Because I'm living here?" "Small towns," Thomas said tiredly. "Everyone's got an opinion about everyone else's business. This is insane." "It's Montana." He hobbled back inside, leaning heavily on the crutch. "You knew it would be different out here." "Different, yes. Medieval, no." Clara went inside and started making breakfast with more force than necessary, slamming pots and cutting bread like she had a personal grudge against it. Rowan arrived an hour later to find her still seething. "Heard the sheriff stopped by," he said. "Word travels fast." "Always does." Rowan set down the toolbox he'd brought. "What do you want?" Clara told him, her voice clipped. When she finished, Rowan's jaw was tight. "That's horseshit," he said. Thomas looked up from his breakfast. "It's politics. Some of the church ladies in town have been complaining. Porter had to at least pretend to care. Church ladies can mind their own business. When has that ever stopped them?" Thomas pushed his plate away. "Look, maybe they have a point. Claire and I need to make a decision one way or another. Either we get married like planned, or we don't. Leaving it hanging just makes everything worse." Clara felt the room close in. "You want to force this now? Because people are gossiping? I want to give you a choice that doesn't involve you being branded as something you're not. The choice is marry you or leave. That's not much of a choice." "Then what do you want?" Thomas's voice rose. "You keep saying we'll figure it out later, but Clara, this is later. I'm healed enough to stand. The homestead's in better shape than it was 2 months ago. We can't just keep drifting." Clara looked at Rowan, who'd gone very still. "I need to think," she said. "How much more time do you need?" "I don't know, more than 5 minutes after being interrogated by the sheriff." She grabbed her shawl and walked out, ignoring Thomas calling after her. She made it halfway to the creek before Rowan caught up. "Clara, wait." She spun around. "What? You want to weigh in too? Tell me what I should do?" "No." "Then why are you following me?" Rowan stopped a few feet away. "Because you're upset and I don't want you wandering off alone when you're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking perfectly straight." "Are you?" Clara's anger cracked. She sat down hard on a fallen log and put her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do." Rowan sat beside her, close but not touching. "You don't love him." It wasn't a question. "No," Clara said quietly. "I don't. I thought I could live with that, make a practical arrangement work. But now that it's real, now that I have to actually say the words and make the promise," she trailed off. "I can't." "Then don't." "And go where?" "Do what?" I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. You could stay here. Work the land with Thomas as partners, not as husband and wife. Clara laughed bitterly. You heard the sheriff. That would make things worse, not better. Rowan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There's another option. Clara looked at him. What? Marry me instead. The words hung in the air between them. Clara stared. What? I know how it sounds, but think about it. You need security, a home, a future. I can give you that. Rowan met her eyes. I have land, a cabin that could be expanded. I'm not Thomas. I'm not hurt, not struggling, and He stopped, seemed to gather himself. I care about you, more than I probably should. Clara's heart hammered. Rowan, you can't this isn't... I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking if you'd consider building something together, real partners, not just on paper. That's exactly what I was supposed to do with Thomas. No, with Thomas it was a transaction. Two strangers making a deal. Rowan shifted to face her fully. We're not strangers anymore. We've worked together, fought together. You know who I am, and I know who you are. That's more than most people have when they marry. Clara stood and paced away, trying to process. Her mind raced. Rowan was offering her everything she'd come west for. Security, partnership, a place to belong. And more than that, if she was honest with herself. When she looked at him, she felt something she hadn't felt with Thomas. Something warm and uncertain and terrifying. What about Thomas? She asked. He's your friend. I'll talk to him. If he's got a problem with it, I'll back off. But Clara, I think he already knows. He sees it too. Sees what? The way you look at me. The way I look at you. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. This is crazy. I've known you for 2 months. And in that time you've seen me at my worst. Stubborn, short-tempered, covered in mud and worse. You haven't run yet. That's not exactly a romantic proposal. Rowan stood. I'm not a romantic man. I can't give you poetry or grand gestures. What I can give you is honesty. A home that won't fall apart the first time the wind blows. Someone who'll work beside you and won't make you feel small for having opinions. And if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You make it sound simple. It is simple. The question is whether you want it. I don't know what I want. Yes, you do. You're just scared to say it. Clara turned away, looking out at the land rolling away in all directions, empty and huge and full of possibility. She thought about the girl who'd stepped off the train 2 months ago, desperate, defeated, clinging to a stranger's promise. That girl was gone. In her place was someone harder, stronger, less afraid of the unknown. I need to talk to Thomas first, she said finally. Rowan nodded. Fair enough. They walked back to the cabin in silence. Thomas was sitting on the porch, whittling something from a piece of scrap wood. He looked up as they approached, and Clara saw understanding flicker across his face. I'll give you two some privacy, Rowan said, heading toward his own cabin. Clara climbed the steps and sat beside Thomas. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He asked you, didn't he? Thomas said. How did you know? Well, because I would have done the same thing if I were him. Thomas set the wood aside. You going to say yes? I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to you first. Thomas, I don't want to hurt you. You didn't ask for any of this. Me showing up, you getting hurt, everything getting so complicated. You didn't ask for it either. Thomas looked at her. Clara, I meant what I said last night. You deserve someone who makes you happy, and Rowan does that. I can see it. But what about you? Your homestead, your plans? My plans included a wife who'd help me build something. It didn't have to be you specifically. I'll manage. Maybe I'll find someone else, maybe I won't. Either way, I'll survive. He smiled slightly. Besides, you've done more for this place in 2 months than I managed in 2 years. I owe you, not the other way around. Clara's throat tightened. You're a good man, Thomas Brennan. Not good enough, apparently. That's not fair. It's true. He picked up the whittling again. Go. Talk to Rowan. Make your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. Clara stood, then impulsively bent and kissed his cheek. Thank you. She found Rowan at his cabin, pacing outside like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw her. "Well?" Clara took a breath. "Ask me again. Properly this time." Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Hope, maybe, or fear. He came closer, then dropped to one knee in the dirt. "Clara Whitlock, will you marry me?" Clara looked down at him, this rough, complicated man who'd shown her more kindness than she'd expected and made her feel stronger than she'd thought possible. "Yes," she said. Rowan stood and pulled her into his arms so fast it nearly knocked the wind out of her. Clara laughed and held on, feeling his heart pound against her cheek. "When?" he asked. "Soon, before the town decides to run me out on a rail." "Tomorrow." Clara pulled back. "Tomorrow? Why wait? We'll ride into town, find someone to marry us, be done with it." Rowan cupped her face. "Unless you want something bigger." "No, simple is fine." Clara felt dizzy. "This is really happening." "Yeah, it is." He kissed her then, tentative at first, then deeper when she didn't pull away. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and for the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They rode into town the next day, both dressed as well as they could manage. Thomas had insisted on coming too, crutch and all, saying someone needed to stand witness. The ceremony took place in the minister's front room and lasted maybe 10 minutes. Clara wore her blue dress. Rowan wore a clean shirt and looked like he might be sick. They stumbled through the vows, signed the register, and just like that, it was done. Clara Hale. The name felt strange and new in her mouth. They had dinner at the boarding house, the three of them plus Margaret Hayes, who'd insisted on being there and brought a cake she'd baked that morning. It was awkward and sweet and nothing like Clara had imagined a wedding day would be, but it was real and it was hers. The ride back to the homestead felt different. Clara sat beside Rowan on the wagon seat, her hand in his, and tried to wrap her mind around the fact that this man was her husband now. "You nervous?" Rowan asked quietly. "Terrified." "Me too." "Really?" "Clara, I haven't shared a bed with anyone in 8 years. I'm scared to death I'm going to do something stupid and make you regret this whole thing." Clara squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out together." When they got back, Thomas insisted on staying in his own cabin that night. Said he'd been meaning to move back anyway, now that he could manage the stairs, which left Clara and Rowan alone in the main cabin. They stood awkwardly in the main room, neither quite sure what to do next. "I can sleep out here if you want," Rowan offered. "Give you time to adjust." Clara shook her head. "We're married now. We don't have to rush anything, but—" She stopped, flustered. Rowan crossed the room and took her hands. "Clara, we do this at whatever pace feels right. There's no rules. I just don't want you to think that I don't—" Clara took a breath. "I want this. I want you. I'm just scared of messing it up." "So am I." Rowan kissed her forehead. "How about we just go to bed and see what happens? No expectations." They did. And it was clumsy and uncertain. And nothing like the romantic stories Clara had read as a girl. But it was honest and tender, and by the time they finally fell asleep tangled in each other, Clara felt like maybe she'd found something better than romance. She'd found a partner. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Rowan moved his things into the main cabin and they worked on making the space feel like it belonged to both of them. Clara hung curtains in the bedroom. Rowan built her a shelf for the few books she'd brought from Boston. They fought sometimes, about small things mostly, how to organize the kitchen, whether to plant wheat or corn in the far field, whose turn it was to feed the chickens. But they also laughed. Rowan had a dry sense of humor that caught Clara off guard, and she discovered she could make him smile just by rolling her eyes at his more ridiculous ideas. Thomas became a fixture at their dinner table, joining them most evenings. The awkwardness faded faster than Clara expected. He seemed genuinely happy for them, and grateful to have friends nearby. One evening, about a month after the wedding, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun set. "I'm thinking about heading to California," Thomas said suddenly. Clara looked at him. "What?" "There's work there. Gold might be played out, but they need farmers, builders. Fresh start, you know." He shrugged. "Nothing keeping me here anymore?" "What about your homestead?" Rowan asked. "Thought I'd sell it to you, if you're interested." Rowan and Clara exchanged glances. "We don't have that kind of money," Clara said. Then work it off. Pay me over time. I'm not in a rush. Thomas smiled. Besides, you two will need more land eventually, especially if you're planning on having kids. Clara felt her face heat. They hadn't talked about that yet. Think about it, Thomas said, standing. I'm not leaving tomorrow, but I am leaving. After he went back to his cabin, Clara leaned against Rowan's shoulder. Kids, she said softly. Someday, maybe. You want them? With you? Yeah, I do. Clara closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. Children running through the fields, the cabin expanded to hold a growing family, years stretching out ahead, filled with work and struggle and small joys. It scared her, but it also felt right. Fall came, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of the brutal winter everyone kept warning her about. Clara and Rowan worked frantically to prepare, cutting wood, storing food, reinforcing the cabin against the cold. Thomas left in late September, selling them his land for a fraction of what it was worth and promising to write when he got settled. Clara hugged him goodbye and meant it when she said she'd miss him. The first snow fell in early October, light and almost pretty. By November, the storms were serious, days-long affairs that left them snowed in and reliant on the supplies they'd stockpiled. Clara had never experienced cold like this. Boston winters were harsh, but Montana was something else entirely. The wind cut like knives, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in minutes. But the cabin held. The stove kept them warm. And when the storms were at their worst, Clara and Rowan would huddle together under every blanket they owned, telling stories and playing cards and finding ways to pass the time. It was during one of these storms, in late December, that Clara realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't been sure. Now, though, there was no doubt. Her body was changing, and she knew. She waited until evening to tell Rowan. They were sitting by the fire, and he was mending a harness while she knitted a scarf that was turning out lopsided. I have something to tell you, she said. Rowan looked up. What? I'm pregnant. He stared at her. The harness slipped from his hands. You're sure? Yes. Rowan stood, then sat back down, then stood again. When? How far along? 3 months, maybe? It's hard to tell exactly. 3. Clara, why didn't you say something? I wanted to be sure. He crossed to her and dropped to his knees, taking her hands. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should I get the doctor? Clara laughed. Rowan, we're snowed in. The doctor can't get here until spring anyway, and I'm fine. Women have been doing this for thousands of years. I know, but... He stopped, looking overwhelmed. A baby. Are you happy? Happy? Clara, I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm happy. He kissed her, gentle and reverent, and Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. We're going to be parents, she whispered. We're going to be terrible at it. Probably. But we'll figure it out. We always do. Winter dragged on, brutal and relentless. Clara's pregnancy became more obvious, her belly swelling despite the rationed food and hard work. Rowan became almost obsessive about her health, insisting she rest more, worry less, let him handle the heavier chores. Clara tolerated it for about a week before snapping that she was pregnant, not dying, and if he tried to wrap her in cotton wool one more time, she'd brain him with the skillet. He backed off. Mostly. By February, Clara was counting the days until the thaw. She was tired of being cold, tired of the cramped cabin, tired of the monotony. Her back ached constantly, and her temper was shorter than usual. I hate this, she said one particularly bad day, staring out at the endless white landscape. Rowan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, resting his hands on her swollen belly. I know. I'm the size of a barn, and I can't see my own feet, and if I have to eat one more meal of dried beans, I'm going to scream. Only 2 more months, maybe less. 2 months is forever. It'll pass. Clara leaned back against him. Promise? Promise. The baby kicked, and Rowan laughed. He's strong. She, Clara corrected. And yes, she is. Takes after her mother. March brought the first real thaw, and with it, a sense of hope. The snow began to melt, revealing the muddy, bedraggled world beneath. Clara could finally go outside without feeling like her face might freeze off. She and Rowan started planning the expansion they'd need, another room for the baby, maybe two if they were ambitious. Rowan sketched rough plans while Clara made lists of supplies they'd need to order from town. "We're really doing this," she said one evening, looking at the drawings spread across the table. "Building a room? Building a life." Rowan looked up at her, and Clara saw everything they'd been through reflected in his eyes. The doubt, the struggle, the small victories and hard-won trust. "Yeah," he said. "We are." Clara went into labor on a warm April morning 3 weeks earlier than expected. Rowan rode to town for the doctor and came back with Margaret Hayes instead. "Doc's delivering twins at the Morrison place," Margaret explained, rolling up her sleeves. "But I've birthed 6 of my own and helped with a dozen more. We'll manage." They did, though it was the longest day of Clara's life. The pain was worse than she'd imagined. Relentless waves that left her gasping and cursing and promising to murder Rowan if she survived this. Margaret just laughed and told her every woman said that. By evening, Clara was exhausted and ready to give up. But Margaret kept pushing her forward, and Rowan stayed beside her the whole time, letting her crush his hand and not complaining once. And then finally, after what felt like years, Clara heard it. A baby's cry. Margaret held up a tiny, squalling, perfect little girl. "Congratulations," she said, grinning. "You've got yourself a fighter." Clara burst into tears. Rowan did too, though he tried to hide it. Margaret cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then placed her in Clara's arms. Clara looked down at her daughter, at the tiny, scrunched face and the shock of dark hair, and felt her entire world shift. "Hello," she whispered. "I'm your mother." The baby stopped crying and opened her eyes. Clara had never believed in love at first sight, but looking at her daughter, she understood it completely. "What should we name her?" Rowan asked, his voice rough. Clara thought about it, about the journey that had brought her here, about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become, about breaking and building and starting over. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Rowan kissed Clara's forehead. "It's perfect." They sat together in the lamplight, the 3 of them, and Clara thought about how far she'd come. From that train platform where she'd waited for a man who never showed, to this moment, holding her child in a home she'd built with her own hands beside a man she'd never expected to love. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better. Hope didn't sleep through the night until she was 4 months old, and by then Clara was so exhausted she could barely remember what rest felt like. The baby was healthy and loud and demanded attention at all hours, and Clara loved her so fiercely it hurt. But that didn't make the sleepless nights any easier. Rowan tried to help. He'd take Hope in the evenings, walking her around the cabin while humming off-key lullabies that seemed to work despite sounding terrible. But when the baby woke hungry at 2 in the morning, there was nothing he could do except bring her to Clara and watch helplessly while his wife fed their daughter with eyes half closed from exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said one particularly brutal night after Hope had been screaming for an hour straight. Clara looked up from where she sat rocking the baby. "For what?" "For not being able to do more. For you having to carry all of this." "Rowan, you do plenty. You work the fields, you've been building the addition, you cook half the meals now. Stop apologizing for biology." "I just wish I could make it easier." Clara managed a tired smile. "You do. Just by being here." Hope finally quieted, her small body going soft against Clara's chest. Clara stood carefully and carried her to the cradle Rowan had built, rough but sturdy, with rockers that actually worked. She laid Hope down and covered her with the quilt Margaret had brought as a gift. The baby's face smoothed out in sleep, peaceful and perfect. Clara stood there watching her daughter breathe, and felt the familiar mix of love and terror that came with being responsible for something so small and breakable. "You're a good mother," Rowan said quietly from the doorway. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time." "Neither did mine, probably, but you love her. That's what matters." Clara turned to face him. "Do you ever regret it? All of this?" "What? You mean the screaming baby and the sleepless nights and the fact that our house smells like sour milk half the time?" "Yes." Rowan crossed the room and pulled her close. "Not for a second." Clara leaned into him, letting herself take comfort in his solid presence. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together. Then Hope started crying again, and they both groaned. By the time summer arrived, Clara felt like she was starting to figure things out. Hope was settling into something resembling a routine, and Clara's body was slowly recovering from the trauma of childbirth. She could work outside again without feeling like she might collapse, and the fog of exhaustion had lifted enough that she could think clearly. The addition to the cabin was taking shape. Rowan had framed out 2 new rooms and was working on the roof. It was slow going. He could only spare a few hours each day, and some days the farm work took all his energy, but progress was progress. Clara helped when she could, holding boards in place while Rowan hammered or hauling supplies from the shed. Hope would watch from a blanket in the shade, gurgling and kicking her feet. "She's going to be a builder," Rowan said one afternoon, watching his daughter grab at a handful of wood shavings. "She's going to put everything in her mouth and give me a heart attack," Clara corrected, swooping in to rescue Hope before she could swallow the shavings. That too. They worked through the afternoon heat, and by evening, the roof was halfway done. Rowan climbed down from the ladder, his shirt soaked with sweat. "We're making good time," he said. Clara looked at the structure. "It's starting to look like something. Give it another month and it'll be finished. Then we can move Hope into her own room." The thought of not having the baby within arm's reach made Clara's chest tighten, even though she knew it was inevitable. Hope was growing fast, already rolling over, already trying to grab everything she could reach. Soon she'd be crawling, then walking, then running away into the world. "What's wrong?" Rowan asked, seeing her expression. "Nothing, just thinking about how fast she's growing." "Too fast. Way too fast." They stood together watching Hope try to stuff her own foot in her mouth, and Clara felt the bittersweet ache of time passing. A letter arrived in July, delivered by a circuit rider passing through. Clara recognized Thomas's handwriting immediately. She read it aloud to Rowan over dinner while Hope gummed a piece of carrot and made a mess of herself. Thomas had made it to California and found work on a farm outside Sacramento. The pay was decent, the weather was better than Montana, and he'd met a widow who ran the boarding house where he was staying. "Nothing serious yet," he wrote, but she made him laugh and didn't seem put off by his limp. "I think about you both often," the letter continued. "I hope the baby is healthy and that the homestead is thriving. I don't regret how things turned out. In fact, I think it worked out exactly how it was supposed to. You two were meant for each other. Anyone could see that. Be well, and if you ever make it out to California, look me up. Your friend Thomas." Clara folded the letter carefully. "He sounds happy." "He does? I'm glad. He deserves it." Rowan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "So do you." "I have it." "Yeah, you do." Hope chose that moment to fling her carrot across the room and laugh like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Clara sighed and went to clean it up, but she was smiling. August brought a drought. The creek that ran through their property slowed to a trickle, and the fields started to brown despite their best efforts to irrigate. Other homesteaders were struggling too. Clara heard stories when she went to town for supplies. Crops failing, livestock dying, families making hard decisions about whether to stay or give up. Rowan worked longer hours trying to save what he could. He'd come in after dark, covered in dust, and collapse at the table without eating. "You need to rest," Clara said one night, watching him stare blankly at his untouched dinner. "I need the wheat to survive." "The wheat doesn't matter if you kill yourself trying to save it. It matters if we want to eat this winter." Clara set down her fork. "Rowan, look at me." He did, reluctantly. "We'll be fine. We've got the chickens, the garden, the supplies we stored. If we lose the wheat, we lose the wheat. But I'm not losing you because you worked yourself to death. I can handle it. Can you? Because you look like you're about to fall over." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted and stubborn, and you're going to make yourself sick." "What do you want me to do, Clara? Just give up?" "I want you to be smart about this. Work during the cooler hours. Take breaks. Ask for help if you need it. There's no one to ask. There's me. You're taking care of Hope. Hope naps. I can work while she sleeps. We're a team, remember? Or did you forget that part when you decided to carry everything yourself?" Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, some of the tension left his shoulders. "You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just let me help." They worked out a system after that. Clara would take Hope out to the field in the morning, set up a shaded area with blankets and toys, and work alongside Rowan while the baby played. It wasn't perfect. Hope would get fussy, or need feeding, or decide that eating dirt was her new favorite activity. But it helped, and slowly the wheat started to recover. A few good rains in September brought the creek back up, and the stalks went from brown to green again. It wasn't going to be a great harvest, but it would be enough. Rowan stood in the field one evening looking at the recovering crop, and Clara saw the relief on his face. "We made it," he said. "We did. I couldn't have done this without you." Clara took his hand. "I know." He laughed, and they walked back to the cabin together, Hope babbling nonsense from Clara's arms. Fall came fast that year. One day it was warm enough to work in shirt sleeves, the next there was frost on the ground. Clara spent her days preserving everything they'd harvested, canning vegetables, drying herbs, smoking meat. The pantry filled up slowly, each jar and sack a small victory against the winter to come. Hope was crawling now, getting into everything. Clara couldn't turn her back for a minute without the baby finding something she shouldn't have. She'd pull herself up on furniture, wobble on unsteady legs, then plop back down and try again. "She's going to be walking by Christmas," Rowan predicted. "Don't rush it. Once she's walking, we'll never catch her." But Clara secretly loved watching her daughter explore. Hope was fearless in the way only babies could be. She'd reach for the hot stove, try to climb stairs that didn't exist, grab at the chickens that wanted nothing to do with her. Clara spent half her time pulling Hope away from danger, but there was something beautiful about that absolute lack of fear. The addition was finished by late October. 2 rooms with proper doors and windows that actually fit their frames. Rowan had even managed to build in some shelving and a small desk. They moved Hope into her new room with mixed feelings. Clara stood in the doorway that first night, listening to her daughter babble to herself in the dark. "She's fine," Rowan said, coming up behind her. "I know." "Then come to bed." "In a minute." Clara stood there a while longer, struggling with the irrational feeling that she was abandoning her child by letting her sleep in a different room. Finally, Rowan pulled her gently away. "She's 10 feet down the hall, not across the country." "I know, I'm being ridiculous. You're being a mother." Hope was fine, of course. She slept through most of the night and woke happy in the morning, completely unbothered by the change. It was Clara who took longer to adjust. Winter came early and hit hard. By mid-November, they were snowed in, and this time Clara knew what to expect. She'd prepared better. More food stored, more wood cut, more activities planned to keep from going stir-crazy. Hope was a different challenge this year. She was mobile and curious and deeply opposed to staying in one place. Clara spent half her time chasing the baby away from the stove or the fireplace or whatever else looked interesting and dangerous. "She's going to give me gray hair before I'm 30, Clara said one particularly exhausting afternoon. Rowan looked up from the sock he was darning. "You've already got a few." Clara threw a wooden spoon at him. He caught it and grinned. "I'm serious. She's fearless. Yesterday I caught her trying to climb into the wood box." "She gets that from you." "I'm not fearless. You traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. You stayed when most people would have run. You built a life from nothing." Rowan set down the sock. "Clara, you're the bravest person I know." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn." "Same thing most days." Hope pulled herself up on the edge of the table and grinned at them, showing her 4 tiny teeth. Clara couldn't help but smile back. "Come here, troublemaker," she said, scooping Hope up. The baby squealed and grabbed Clara's hair, yanking hard enough to make her wince. "Gentle," Clara said, trying to extract her hair from Hope's surprisingly strong grip. Hope just laughed. The winter felt longer this year, maybe because they had a toddler to entertain. Hope grew restless being cooped up, and her moods became unpredictable. Some days she was happy and playful. Other days she cried for hours for no reason Clara could determine. "Is this normal?" Rowan asked one particularly bad day after Hope had been screaming since sunrise. "I don't know. I've never done this before." "Maybe she's sick?" Clara felt Hope's forehead for the 100th time. "She's not feverish. I think she's just frustrated." "About what?" "About being stuck inside. About not being able to do everything she wants." "I don't know, Rowan. I can't read her mind." Clara heard the snap in her own voice and immediately felt guilty. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." "So am I." Rowan took Hope from her. Go rest. I'll handle her for a while. You've been working all morning, and you've been dealing with her all morning. Go. Lie down. Clara didn't have the energy to argue. She went to the bedroom and closed the door, collapsing onto the bed. She could hear Hope still crying, hear Rowan's low voice trying to soothe her. She fell asleep before she meant to and woke hours later to silence. Panic shot through her. She rushed out to the main room and found Rowan asleep in the chair, Hope curled on his chest. Both of them were breathing steadily, peacefully. Clara stood there watching them, her heart settling. Her husband and her daughter, her family. She'd never imagined this specific life, these specific people. But looking at them now, she couldn't imagine anything else. Spring came as a relief. The snow melted, the creek swelled, and they could finally go outside without freezing. Hope discovered mud and became obsessed with it, smearing it on everything she could reach. She's feral, Rowan said, watching Hope sit down directly in a puddle and splash with both hands. She's exploring. She's going to need a bath every day at this rate. Probably. They planted the fields early that year, working while Hope played nearby. She was walking now, stumbling really, but getting steadier every day. She'd toddle after the chickens, fall down, get back up, try again. Margaret stopped by in late April with a basket of preserves and stayed for dinner. She was delighted by Hope, who'd grown considerably since Margaret had seen her last. She's got your determination, Margaret told Clara. And his stubbornness, she added, nodding at Rowan. Poor child doesn't stand a chance, Clara said. She'll be fine, better than fine. Margaret bounced Hope on her knee. She's got 2 parents who love her and a home that won't fall apart the first time things get hard. That's more than most kids get. After Margaret left, Clara thought about those words. A home that won't fall apart. She looked around the cabin, at the additions they'd built, the furniture Rowan had made, the curtains she'd sewn. Every piece of it had been fought for, earned through hard work and harder winters. This was hers, theirs, and it wasn't going anywhere. Summer brought another drought, though not as bad as the year before. They managed it better this time, rationing water and adjusting their planting strategy. The wheat survived, and so did they. Hope turned 1 in early spring, though they celebrated in April because no one was exactly sure of her birthday. Clara made a small cake with precious sugar they'd saved, and Hope smeared frosting everywhere and loved every second of it. To Hope, Rowan said, raising a cup of water in a mock toast. To Hope? Clara echoed. Hope slapped her hands in her cake and giggled. They were good moments, Clara thought, simple and sweet and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But she was paying attention now. She'd learned to notice the small joys between the hard work and harder weather. The second winter was easier than the first. They knew what to expect, had better supplies, had established routines. Hope was bigger and more capable, able to entertain herself for longer stretches. Clara found herself with actual free time. Not much, but enough to start teaching herself to read better. She'd never had much schooling, and while she could manage basic reading, anything complex was a struggle. Rowan helped her in the evenings, sitting beside her while she worked through one of the 3 books they owned. He was patient when she stumbled over words, encouraging when she got frustrated. Why are you doing this? He asked one night. Because I want to be able to read to Hope. Really read, not just make up stories because I can't figure out the words. You're doing fine. I want to do better than fine. Rowan smiled. Of course you do. By the time spring came again, Clara could read well enough to get through a simple story without help. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. Hope was talking now, single words mostly, but a few short phrases. Mama and Dada and no, which she used constantly. She had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. She's going to be trouble when she's older, Clara said, watching Hope argue with a chicken. She's already trouble. Fair point. They were sitting on the porch, taking a rare moment of rest. The fields were planted, the chores were done, and Hope was occupied with harassing poultry. Do you ever think about having more? Rowan asked. Clara looked at him. More what? Kids. The question caught her off guard. She hadn't really thought beyond Hope, had been too busy surviving each day to plan for more. I don't know, she said honestly. Do you? Maybe. Someday. If you wanted to. Clara thought about it. About being pregnant again. About another birth. About starting over with a new baby while Hope was still so young. The thought was exhausting. But also, not entirely terrible. "Ask me again in a year," she said. "Fair enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hope discover that chickens could peck and didn't appreciate being grabbed. "She's going to learn that lesson the hard way," Rowan observed. "Most lessons are learned that way." "True." Hope yelped as a hen pecked her hand, then sat down hard and started crying. Clara started to get up, but Rowan stopped her. "Give her a minute." Hope cried for a few seconds, then stopped and looked at her hand. No blood, just a small red mark. She wiped her eyes, stood up, and toddled back toward the house, staying well away from the chickens this time. "See," Rowan said. "She figured it out." Hope climbed the porch steps on her hands and knees and crawled into Clara's lap, sniffling. "Chickens mean," she announced. "Yes, they are," Clara agreed, kissing her daughter's head. "But you're okay." Hope nodded and stuck her thumb in her mouth, content now that she'd been comforted. Clara held her close and looked out at the land, at the fields she'd helped plant, the cabin she'd helped build, the life she'd carved out of nothing. She thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train almost 3 years ago, desperate and scared and clinging to a stranger's promise. That girl was gone completely now, replaced by someone harder and stronger and infinitely more capable. She'd been broken down to nothing and built herself back up piece by piece, and what she'd built was real and solid and hers. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan asked. Clara looked at him, this man who'd given her a choice when she'd had none, who'd worked beside her through every struggle, who'd loved her when she'd thought herself unlovable. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," she said. "Long way from that train depot." "Very long way." Hope shifted in her arms, half asleep now, safe and warm and completely certain that her parents would protect her from anything, even mean chickens. Clara kissed her daughter's head again and let herself feel the full weight of what they'd built together. It wasn't perfect. Some days were still brutally hard. The land could be cruel, the weather merciless, the work endless, but it was theirs, every inch of it. And Clara Hale, who'd once been Clara Whitlock, abandoned and alone on a platform in the middle of nowhere, had finally found exactly where she belonged. The letter came in late summer, 3 years after Hope was born. Clara was in the garden pulling weeds while Hope chased butterflies, and Rowan was mending fence on the far side of the property when the circuit rider stopped by. The man handed Clara an envelope with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting and rode off before she could ask questions. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and opened it carefully. It was from her sister in Philadelphia, the sister who'd cut her off years ago, who'd made it clear that Clara was an embarrassment to be distanced from. Clara almost threw it away unread. But curiosity won out. The letter was short and stiff, written in the same formal tone her sister had always used. Their cousin, the one who'd grudgingly taken Clara in after their parents died, had passed away. There was a small inheritance, nothing substantial, but Clara was entitled to her share if she wanted to claim it. "It would require you to travel to Boston to sign papers," the letter continued. "I understand if that's impossible given your circumstances. If you choose not to come, the money will be distributed among the other relatives. Either way, please respond by October. Regards, Elizabeth." No, dear sister. No, I hope you're well. Just cold practicality. Clara folded the letter and looked at Hope, who was now trying to catch a grasshopper with her bare hands. Money? Not much, probably. Her cousin had lived modestly, but any amount would help. They could expand the house further, buy better equipment, maybe even hire help during harvest season. But Boston. The thought made her stomach turn. She showed the letter to Rowan that evening after Hope was in bed. He read it twice, then set it down. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell Elizabeth to keep it, that I don't need anything from that family anymore. And the other part?" "The other part thinks about what we could do with even a little extra money. Fix the barn roof properly instead of patching it every spring. Buy seed that's actually good quality instead of whatever's cheapest. Maybe get a real cow instead of relying on the neighbors." Rowan nodded slowly. "Those are good reasons." But you don't owe them anything, Clara. Not your time, not your presence, not a damn thing. If you want to go claim what's yours, I'll support you. If you want to burn that letter and never think about them again, I'll support that too." Clara stared at the letter, thinking about the cousin who'd made her feel like a burden, the sister who'd abandoned her, The whole city of Boston that represented everything she'd escaped from. "I don't want to go," she said quietly, "but I think I need to." "Why?" "Because if I don't, I'll always wonder what I gave up, and I'll resent them for making me choose." Clara looked at Rowan. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." "Would you come with me? You and Hope?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Boston's a long way. We'd need to leave the homestead for at least a month, maybe more. That's a risk." "I know. But if you need to do this, we'll find a way to make it work." Clara felt relief wash through her. "Thank you. When would we need to leave?" "Soon, if we're going to get there and back before winter." They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Rowan arranged for their neighbor, a decent man named Anders, to check on the place while they were gone. They harvested what they could early, stored everything that wouldn't spoil, and packed for a journey Clara had never imagined making again. Hope was excited about the adventure, too young to understand what they were actually doing. To her, it was just a chance to see new things and ride in wagons and maybe trains. Clara felt sick the entire week before they left. The journey east was long and exhausting. Hope didn't travel well. She got cranky on the trains, refused to sleep at normal hours, and wanted to explore every station they stopped at. Rowan handled it better than Clara expected, patient even when Hope threw a full tantrum in the middle of a crowded platform in Chicago. "She's tired," he said, scooping up their screaming daughter. "We're all tired," Clara muttered, but she felt guilty immediately. None of this was Hope's fault. They reached Boston in early September, and Clara felt the city close around her like a fist. The noise, the crowds, the smell of too many people living too close together. It was overwhelming after years of open Montana sky. Hope clung to Clara, frightened by all the strangers and the strange sounds. "It's all right," Clara soothed, though she didn't feel all right herself. "We'll be done here soon." They found a modest boarding house and settled in. Rowan looked deeply uncomfortable. He'd never been in a city this size, and Clara could see him struggling with the confinement of it all. "How did you live like this?" he asked, staring out the window at the narrow street below. "You get used to it. Or you think you do." "I don't think I could." "You won't have to. We'll take care of business and leave." But taking care of business proved more complicated than Clara had hoped. The lawyer handling the estate was slow and pedantic, insisting on multiple meetings to review paperwork. Her sister refused to meet with her at all, sending a terse note saying she saw no point in false pleasantries. The inheritance, when it was finally settled, was smaller than Clara had hoped, but more than she'd feared, enough to make a real difference back home. On their last day in Boston, Clara took Hope for a walk through the neighborhood where she'd grown up. The streets looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The house where her family had lived was still standing, but clearly occupied by someone else now. Hope tugged on her hand. "Mama, go home now?" Clara looked down at her daughter. This little person who'd never known hunger or desperation, who was growing up safe and loved on land her parents owned. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home." But first, there was one more thing she needed to do. She found her way to the cemetery where her parents were buried. She hadn't been here since the funeral, couldn't afford the trolley fare back then, and later had been too angry at them for dying and leaving her with nothing. The graves were simple, the stones already weathering. Clara stood there with Hope fidgeting beside her, trying to figure out what she felt. Not grief exactly. That had burned out years ago. Not anger either, not anymore. Just a quiet recognition that these people, flawed and foolish as they'd been, had given her life, and what she'd done with that life was entirely her own. "Who's that?" Hope asked, pointing at the stones. "Your grandparents. They died before you were born." "They in the ground?" "Yes." Hope considered this with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could manage. "That's sad. Sometimes. But they're at rest now." Clara didn't know if she believed that, but it seemed like the right thing to say. They left Boston the next morning, and Clara felt lighter the moment the train pulled out of the station. Rowan noticed too. "Better?" he asked. "Much." "Any regrets?" Clara thought about it. "No, I'm glad I came. I needed to see it again, needed to prove to myself that I didn't belong there anymore, if I ever did." "You belonged in Montana the moment you stepped off that train." "I didn't feel like it at the time." "No, but you grew into it." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder while Hope napped between them and felt the truth of his words settle in her bones. They got back to the homestead in late September to find everything intact. Anders had kept his word, checking on the place regularly and even doing some minor repairs. The chickens were fine, the garden had survived, and nothing had burned down or blown away. "Home," Hope announced, climbing down from the wagon and running toward the house. Clara stood in the yard and looked at everything they'd built. The expanded cabin, the rebuilt chicken coop, the fields that were starting to show the first hints of autumn gold. This was hers, not because someone had given it to her or because she'd married into it, but because she'd fought for it. Every nail, every board, every season survived. Rowan came up beside her. "What are you thinking? That I never want to leave again? Not even for a visit? Not even—" He laughed and kissed her temple. "Fair enough." They used the inheritance money carefully, new tools that didn't break every other week, quality seed for next spring's planting, materials to finally fix the barn roof properly, and enough left over to tuck away for emergencies, because there were always emergencies. Winter came early that year, and it was brutal, the worst they'd experienced yet. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid within minutes of being poured. Snow piled up higher than the windows. They were trapped inside for weeks at a time, burning through their wood supply faster than Clara was comfortable with. Hope got sick in January, a fever that spiked high enough to send Clara into a panic. There was no way to get to town for a doctor, no way to get help. They were completely alone. Clara stayed up 3 nights straight, bathing Hope in cool water when the fever raged, wrapping her in blankets when she shivered, forcing her to drink even when she didn't want to. Rowan helped where he could, but there wasn't much he could do except watch his daughter suffer and his wife slowly break from exhaustion. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Hope woke up weak and pale but lucid, asking for water in a small voice. Clara burst into tears. Rowan held them both, his wife and his daughter, and Clara felt the terror of how close they'd come to losing her. "She's all right," Rowan said, his own voice rough. "She's going to be all right." Hope recovered slowly over the next few weeks. By the time the spring thaw came, she was back to her normal, energetic self, though Clara found herself watching her more closely, always listening for signs that the fever might return. "You can't protect her from everything," Rowan said gently one evening, watching Clara check Hope's forehead for the 3rd time in an hour. "I can try." "Clara, she's fine. You need to let yourself believe that." Clara knew he was right, but the fear had burrowed deep. It took months before she could fully relax again. Spring brought new challenges. A late frost killed half their seedlings, and they had to replant everything. One of their best laying hens got taken by a fox. The barn roof, supposedly fixed for good, started leaking again in a different spot. But they also had small victories. Hope started speaking in full sentences, her vocabulary exploding overnight. The wheat came in better than expected despite the late start. Clara's garden produced more vegetables than they could eat, and she spent happy days preserving them for winter. They fell into a rhythm again, the kind that came from years of working together. Clara could anticipate what Rowan needed before he asked. He could read her moods, knowing when she needed space and when she needed comfort. They still fought sometimes, about money, about priorities, about whose turn it was to fix the damn chicken coop again. But the fights were shorter now, resolved faster. They'd learned how to be angry without being cruel, how to disagree without tearing each other down. In late summer, Clara realized she was pregnant again. She told Rowan on a quiet evening after Hope was asleep. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms. "Another one," he said, wonder in his voice. "Are you happy?" "Yeah." Terrified, but happy. "Me too." This pregnancy was harder than the first. Clara was older now, and her body protested more. She was sick for months, exhausted all the time, and her back ached constantly. Hope, now 4 years old, didn't understand why Mama couldn't play as much anymore and took it personally. "Mama's growing a baby," Rowan explained patiently. "It makes her tired." Hope frowned. "Why?" "Because babies are hard work, even before they're born." "I don't want a baby. Send it back." Clara laughed despite her nausea. "Doesn't work that way, sweetheart." Hope crossed her arms, thoroughly unimpressed. The baby, another girl, was born in early spring. The birth was faster than Hope's had been, but more painful, and Clara was convinced halfway through that she might actually die. But she didn't. And when Margaret placed the baby in her arms, Clara felt the same overwhelming love she'd felt with Hope. "What should we name her?" Rowan asked, looking exhausted and relieved in equal measure. Clara looked at her new daughter, smaller than Hope had been, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were already trying to focus. "Grace," she said. "Her name is Grace." Because that's what this felt like. A second chance. Another opportunity to get it right. Hope was less than thrilled with her new sister. She'd spent 4 years as the center of attention, and suddenly there was this screaming thing that took up all of Mama's time. "She's loud," Hope complained. "You were loud too," Clara said, trying to nurse Grace while keeping an eye on Hope, who was poking at the baby's foot. "I wasn't that loud." "You absolutely were." Hope glared at her sister with the intense jealousy only a 4-year-old could manage. But slowly, grudgingly, she came around. Clara caught her singing to Grace one afternoon, a made-up song that didn't really have a melody. And when Grace smiled for the first time, Hope's face lit up. "She likes me," Hope announced. "Of course she does. You're her big sister." Hope considered this new responsibility seriously. From then on, she appointed herself Grace's protector, hovering whenever anyone got too close and insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Clara watched her daughters together and felt something settle in her chest. Her family was complete now. 2 children, a husband who loved her, a home they'd built together. The years that followed were full and hard and good. They expanded the farm bit by bit, buying Anders's land when he decided to move further west. Hope started helping with real chores, feeding chickens and gathering eggs, and pulling weeds with only minimal complaining. Grace was quieter than Hope had been, more observant. She'd sit and watch everything with serious eyes, absorbing the world around her. "That one's going to be trouble in a different way," Rowan predicted. "How so?" "She's thinking all the time. You can see it. She's going to be the kind who asks why about everything." He was right. By the time Grace could talk, why became her favorite word. Why did chickens lay eggs? Why was the sky blue? Why did Papa have to work so hard? Clara answered as best she could, sometimes making things up when she didn't know the real answer. The girls grew. Hope turned 7, then 8, then 9. Grace followed behind, always trying to keep up with her sister. They fought constantly, over toys, over chores, over who got to sit next to Mama at dinner. But they also played together for hours, creating elaborate games that made sense only to them. Clara watched them and thought about how different their lives were from hers at that age. They had enough food. They had parents who loved them. They had security and stability and a future that wasn't dependent on someone else's charity. She'd given them that, she and Rowan together. One evening, when Hope was 10 and Grace was 6, Clara found herself sitting on the porch alone. Rowan had taken the girls to check on the cattle, and the house was blessedly quiet. She thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train 11 years ago, lost and desperate, and certain her life was over. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, the struggle, yes, but also the triumph. The fear, but also the love. The endless work, but also the satisfaction of building something real. Would that girl believe her? Probably not. But she'd lived it anyway. Every hard day, every small victory, every moment of doubt and determination. Rowan and the girls came back as the sun was setting, all 3 of them talking over each other about something they'd seen in the far pasture. Hope was gesturing wildly. Grace was trying to correct her, and Rowan was pretending to listen while clearly amused by both of them. Clara watched them climb the porch steps, her family, and felt gratitude so sharp it hurt. "Mama, you should have seen it," Hope said, launching into a story about a calf that had apparently done something remarkable. Clara listened and smiled and thought about how nothing ever turned out the way you planned, how sometimes the broken promises led to better things than the kept ones ever could have. She'd wanted security when she came west, a practical arrangement, a roof over her head, a way to survive. What she'd gotten instead was a life worth living. That night, after the girls were in bed, Clara and Rowan sat together by the fire. They didn't talk much, didn't need to after all these years. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar. "You ever regret it?" Rowan asked suddenly. "Any of this?" Clara looked at him. "Which part?" "All of it. Getting on that train, staying when things got hard, marrying me instead of Thomas. The whole thing." Clara thought about it honestly. There had been moments when she'd questioned everything, when Hope had been sick, when money was tight, when the work felt endless and the winters too brutal. Moments when she'd wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But those moments always passed. "No," she said, "I don't regret it." "Not even a little?" "Not even a little." Clara took his hand. "This life is hard, Rowan. Harder than I ever imagined it could be, but it's mine, ours. We built it together, and no one can take that away from us." Rowan squeezed her hand. "I love you. You know that?" "I know." Clara smiled. "I love you too." They sat like that for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers, listening to the wind outside and the quiet sounds of their daughters sleeping down the hall. Clara thought about the future, about Hope and Grace growing up, about the farm continuing to expand, about the possibility of grandchildren someday, about growing old in this place they'd carved out of the wilderness. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But they'd face it together, the way they'd faced everything else. With stubborn determination and hard work, and a refusal to give up when things got difficult. Because that's what you did when you built something real. You protected it. You fought for it. You refused to let it break. Clara Hale had learned that lesson the hard way, standing alone on a train platform with nothing but a broken promise and desperate hope. And she'd spent every day since proving that sometimes the best things in life came from the wreckage of failed plans. She'd been looking for survival when she came to Montana. What she'd found instead was a home, a family, a purpose. And that, Clara knew, was worth every struggle it had taken to get here. The fire crackled. Rowan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Clara closed her eyes and let herself feel the full weight of contentment. She was home, and she was never leaving again.